everyone. Welcome back. My name is Jeff Mendelson, the One Big Tip podcast. And today I am really pleased to have with me on the line Sunil Godse. Sunil is a brand and business coach and has spoken on stages around the world and teaches businesses how to crush the competition by leveraging the intuition of others to their trust within 14 seconds. So Sunil's going to have a lot of experience. Going to be doing this in 14 seconds. Sunil, to the show.
Thank you very much. I'm really excited to be here. Thanks for the opportunity, and hoping to drop some knowledge bombs on what people may be shocked to hear about earning trust in 14 seconds. And they may say really, but when we dive into the conversation at the end of this podcast, they're going to say, yeah, that absolutely makes sense.
I'm really excited about this. Can you please take a moment to give us a little bit of a background, how you got in and how you landed on these techniques, and basically what you're up to right now in order to make it happen?
Yeah, absolutely. So the premise of really diving into intuition really came from my first book called Fail Fast, Succeed Faster. And the premise of that book was that if you learned from the failures and hurdles of others, business executives and entrepreneurs who are in the book, then as long as you don't repeat those, then what would happen is you should be able to succeed faster. And what I found was that every time I went on stage to talk about this, about the book, the one question I kept getting was, okay, Sunil, give me the one thing that's going to make me successful. And so I used to kind of roll my eyes saying that, okay, listen, I didn't come here with a cue card or a PDF sheet. This is a 400-page book here that I wrote on various hurdles and failures until I went back to the audio recordings. And what I noticed was that there was this underlying theme of I should have trusted my gut. I should have trusted my intuition. I ignored it. I knew what the right decision was. 80 to 90% of the business executives or entrepreneurs were talking about this thing called intuition. And so I really needed to take a deep dive into what this thing called intuition was. And when I looked at the times that I trusted my intuition, and which was sort of the sprinkling of entrepreneurship, I distinctly remember when I was 5 years old that there were these video games that I wanted my dad to buy. And he was saying it was way too expensive. And I had this voice tell me, Sunil, go door to door to raise money. And that's exactly what I did. I went door to door. I raised $200. $100 went to my dad for the video games, and the other $100 went to charity. And so I also thought about the times when I ignored my intuition. And there were times where, as I said, when I was 5 years old, there's this sprinkle of entrepreneurship that I had in me. And throughout my life, I always had some sort of dealing with either sales or marketing or things like that really made me happy, gave me a lot of joy. Yet, as a South Asian male, there's only 4 career doors that you actually go through. It's doctor, lawyer, engineer, or failure, and that's it. And I ended up going into door number 3 as an engineer, and I hated it. And I became a private investor 2 years into my engineering career, and I was starting to make 5 times more in dividends than I was as an engineer. And so I quit engineering, and that's when my entrepreneurial journey started. And I had 5 to 6 businesses, raised over $20 million in revenues. And so this thing called intuition was very real in terms of me starting businesses and really getting people to embrace what I was selling, embrace working for me, and having those key relationships that were so important. And so when it comes to intuition and what I call intuitive branding, for you, for people think that's 14 seconds. What I would suggest to people is walk into the doors of a company, and you may have already done this, to say, wow, there's something happening here that's really positive, or that's something negative. Or if you look at the companies you wanted to work for, these were managers that allowed you to be psychologically safe, that allowed you to be creative, and even think about the products that you buy. Why do you buy those products? And it's because you trust that those products or services solve something that you have, which is a problem. And even a commodity item like ketchup, for example, solves a problem for you. I mean, yes, it is something that you can maybe put on hot dogs or burgers, but was it something that you had at the family table? And so there's some sort of value there. And we had one where Heinz had come into a community in Ontario, and because they're looking at the bottom line, they fired a whole bunch of people. Guess what? I changed from Heinz to a different brand called French's because that didn't resonate with me. And I just think that's a terrible way to run business. So they lost my trust. And when they lost my trust, they took a commodity item like ketchup, but they've lost me as a customer. And I'm not just the only one, because there's a number of people I talked with. And so that lost revenue is really there because they lost that trust. And it took me just to read that article to say, wow, that doesn't resonate with my values, and therefore I'm going to switch to a different brand. All that takes 14 seconds. And if you look at the research on intuition, intuition actually hits the amygdala, which is the limbic system. All it knows is it's an immediate fight or flight. And when I looked at the research shows that intuition actually hits you on average 7 to 10 seconds before you actually make a decision or take action. And they did the similar experiment with entrepreneurs. And they looked at the decisions that entrepreneurs made, and they measured things like skin conductance and heart rate. And what they found was that intuition hits entrepreneurs on average 7 seconds before they make an intuitive decision. This is research studies. These are MRIs. And when I looked at a number of papers on trust versus distrust. When you're looking at exchanging value or money, exchanging hands for services, the MRIs were showing that there were particular areas of the brain that light up. And so that value exchange, when it's trusted, happens on average in 14 seconds if I trust the other party. If I do not trust the other party, there's a different part of the brain that lights up that says distrust. And so if I have distrust with someone, not only do you have to get me to try and trust you, but you also have to get me to not trust another brand. So from a cost perspective, an opportunity cost perspective, your marketing dollars are going to, yes, you're going to have some nice, great commercials, hopefully, that has a message that I trust, that what you're saying is actually matching what your words are, because my intuition's always watching. And so not only is it the cost of you, if you've lost me as a customer, of bringing me back, but it's also the cost of you taking me outside of the product that's already serving me, that is your direct competitor. And so the costs are really high. And remember, this happens in 14 seconds by the research. And so that's why it's important that in your marketing messaging, in your purpose, what's your story? Why are you doing it? Does the marketing message resonate with what you're saying? Do the managers walk the talk? All these things are what your intuition is constantly on the lookout for trust factors. And if I don't trust you as an employee, I'm not going to work for you. If I do trust you, then there's a report called the Edelman Trust Report that shows that employees who trust those people they work with are 37% more productive, and it hits the bottom line with a lift of 31% simply on trust alone. So you want stats? I can give you the stats up to yin yang, but trust is something that is intangible, but we all have it. Look at the people we surround ourselves with. Look at the situations that we walk into. A very, very easy one is if I go into, let's say, when my wife and I were buying a house, right? We'd walk into a house and instantly I would know this is a house, but not a home. It just didn't have that feeling. That was my intuition saying, this is not the house for me. And so we would constantly go back and forth into a situation where we get the house and it felt inviting. It felt warm. And you're taking that same thing and we're doing that in the workplace. As employees and as customers, do I resonate with you? And even more so with everything going on with Black Lives Matter and taking the knee and Nike standing out and seeing a lift in sales, companies actually standing for something and people believing that they stand for something, and even thinking that they're believing something and not. I had an interview with a person by the name of Sarah Lovestyle, who's an influencer online, and she was, after Black Lives Matter happened, company approached her to be an influencer for their brand, and she instantly knew this was a political ploy, and so a couple of questions about people of color on their team, it had them baffled. And so she didn't trust them. It was a major deal for her, lots of money that people thought she was nuts to turn down, but she didn't trust the brand. And if she wants to be an influencer, she needs to be seen as authentic to those who she coaches, for the brands she helps. And if she becomes a sellout or inauthentic, her business falls apart very quickly. And again, it's just 14 seconds. That's all you need.
I wanted to, as you were talking about, I guess the other word that was coming into my head was the difference between intuition and experience, right? Because if, as a marketer, right, I have an opinion of what works and what doesn't, and sometimes my experience will come in, just slap that intuition down, like, no, not going to work for this particular client, and here's why, right? How do you differentiate between someone who is going with their gut, their intuition, versus someone who has actual real world experience in,
Yeah.
in creating that? How does that work?
Yeah, so this is where we kind of get into the complexity of intuition, and this is where when we talk about listening to our gut, or hearing the voices, and the sort of the woo-woo part of intuition, what I really needed to go, and because I didn't resonate with that end, I needed to combine that with sort of science. And one of the things I discovered is there's actually 4 types of intuition that actually work all together, that help inform you as to what decision you should make. And I'll go through them very, very quickly. The one that you're talking about is called experiential intuition. And what happens is, ever since you're born, if you look at your brain like an iceberg, the subconscious part of your brain, which is underwater, is 90%, and the 10% above water is the conscious part of your brain. So when you're born, and research has shown that intuition has happened to infants as young as 2 months old. When you're born, you have all these neurons experiencing all this information, all the experiences, all the learning, both good and bad, both formal and informal. So your street smarts, and it's putting all the stuff into the subconscious area of your brain like a library, so that when you need to, in your case, when you're looking at that client and you're looking at that decision, your intuition is actually reaching into the subconscious part of your brain and picking up those campaigns that might have not worked or did work. And what your intuition is signaling to you, because it works on signals, is that this is not going to work for your company, this client. And so your intuition is actually informing you that what you're saying is correct, because it's based on that experience. So that experience is a huge part of your intuition. And I think this is one thing that people miss, is that they just think it's sort of the roll of a dice, or just comes. And for those people who think it's like voices from God, or it's manifestation, I'm not here to shove a definition down anybody's throat. I'm just telling you what are the components of it. And it speaks to you through these signals, and it helps you with decisions. And so we've got experiential intuition. The next is situational intuition. And very much like when I'm going into the example I gave with the house, when you come into a situation, you're kind of like, something's off here, or this situation seems right. So you could be looking at a client portfolio and the messaging, and you may say, yeah, this aligns well with my experience, and it aligns well with who the client is. And so your situational intuition will say, absolutely. The third of the 4 is called relational intuition. And this is the one where it actually looks at the person to see if there's anything that's deceptive, that's looking at matching the words with the actions, the tone, what's being written. Are there deceptive twitches on the facial expressions? And remember, this is happening in a split second. So is your client telling you the truth? Do you believe what your client is saying? The words that are saying on the campaign, do you believe that that's what that client is going to be, is actually going to be delivering? Now, that may not be your purview as a digital marketer, but certainly if that client wants to have business, and as a customer, if I see this beautiful, great messaging in the marketing, and I go down a little bit more engagement, and I find I don't really believe that person. There's a disconnect that my intuition is picking up on. I lose trust right away, and that company will never see my business. And unfortunately, possibly, I may tell other people. And so this is where that trust factor comes in. And the last of the four is called creative intuition. This is the actual decision that you make. And so in some cases, you actually make a mundane decision like eating a sandwich or turning left at the lights. But if you make a decision that's so obtuse in nature, then your creative intuition is really, really high. And I'll give you a very quick case study. There's a fellow who I interviewed named John Rothschild. This guy was actually a non-believer. And so when I went to interview him, he said intuition does not exist. But by the time I got him to tell me his experiences, his signals, his intuition, his decisions, in the course of an hour, he got it. And the very last story he was telling me is that this is a guy who was an investment banker making $3 to $4 million a year. And he traded it away to run this tiny, bankrupt little restaurant. And he tells his wife, this just feels right. And he did. He walked into that tiny, bankrupt little restaurant because, as he now says, an hour later, you have to trust your intuition. From someone an hour before saying, this stuff just does not exist, Sunil. And that tiny bankrupt little restaurant was Eastside Mario's location number one. And he grew that to over $2 billion in revenues over 20 years, all because it felt right. That's the power of intuition.
Story. Wow, what an amazing story.
And I continue to hear this time and time again. I've had people who've been incredibly homeless, and another homeless person told him, do I have money? And, the one person I interviewed, Garain Jones, basically tells this other homeless person, you probably have more money than I do. And the other homeless person tells Garain, change your mindset, change your life. That one sentence had him start doing YouTube videos from his car, from the storage unit where he was sleeping, from the streets he was on. And he's now become a multimillionaire, speaking about inspiration and trusting your gut and manifestation and his life. And you just got to do it, all from one sentence, right? And so here's a real business that people are paying him for coaching, paying him to speak, because they trust his message, and that inspirational message to really kind of do things is really based on trust. And that's what gets people to move the needle.
What an amazing story. Wow. So, you know something? I'd like to segue into your one big tip here, which is how to implement this, right? Like, so one thing is to, I think anybody who has a relatively high value of themselves are like, yeah, I'm pretty intuitive. I can figure this out, But how do you implement intuitive branding in order to earn that trust, in order to get them to like you and ultimately get them to buy from you?
The biggest thing is really kind of telling your story, or what's your purpose, right? So every brand has some kind of story. Even in a commodity brand, each of their products or services will have a story. And what does that brand or product do for the customer? What does that service do for the end customer? What problem is it solving? And when you can put it down to that kind of an emotional, feeling-based type of solution or piece of advertising or marketing material, then what you're doing is you're hitting that emotional core, which is exactly where your intuition comes. So the one big tip I would have for most people is really kind of speak, what's your purpose? Why are you doing things? And I'll talk about it from an entrepreneurial perspective. Certainly, you can do that with Dove, and you can do this with, Hershey's chocolate and things like that. And in fact, I saw something with Cadbury. There was an ad, a 90-second ad yesterday I was shown on Twitter, where they just had a gorilla playing the drums to Phil Collins, and it became a huge hit, and nothing to do with Cadbury chocolate, because it hit an emotional chord with potential customers, and they got a sales uplift from that. So from an entrepreneurial perspective, what's the purpose? What's your purpose? What's your story? And that has to resonate and come out, because everybody has a story. Everybody's going to open up a business for some reason. And that reason has to be genuine enough. And when you tell me what your story and your purpose is, then you'll attract those people that will come around with you that resonate with that story, because there's something in that story that helps them and their lives. Those are the right people that are going to buy from you, because that story resonates with their life, and they're going to want what you want to increase their life in whatever way that's positive. And that's how they're going to exchange money. Those are the same people that are really drawn to your story, that want to work for you because they intrinsically or intuitively want to spread that message for you. And so whenever I hire my team members, it's very, very important that the intuition and helping other people's lives is very important and ingrained in why they want to come work for me. And I can tell that when I interview them to come for the business, whether they're here just because I'm paying them a certain dollar per hour, or are they really behind the change that I want to make. And I only have those that want to make that change. And I've got a lot of people trying to come on board, as you can imagine, with any business trying to get a job, especially in these days and times. And so when you speak with that purpose, when you lead with that purpose, then your marketing message becomes easy because it is your purpose. Then everybody you hire is easy because they're behind your purpose. So that means they trust you, which means you're going to get more productivity, which means you're going to get better sales. Those customers are statistically going to spend more. They're going to tell more. And by the time they hit the third purchase, they're 76% more likely to buy again. So you've got recurring customers, which means your marketing spend is much cheaper because stats show it's 6 times cheaper to have a marketing, in your marketing spend for a recurring customer than a new customer. So this trust that may be intangible that comes through you speaking your purpose has incredible tangible results. And this is why those companies that aren't doing it right, which are the 99% that fail by the time it's year 5, aren't doing it. And the 1% that do it have all these alignments in terms of customers, employees in the marketplace, where trust is the underlying theme because of the purpose that they generate and they talk about. And I'm talking about billion-dollar companies as well, where the core values are trust-based. And I've certainly had a couple of people I've talked about that. That's how you crush the competition because nobody else is doing it. And that's
amazing.
It's down to trust. Down to trust.
I feel that trust factor really permeates itself into different areas of business, right? Because what happens is, like even when I'm building a corporate culture within my, with the people that I hire, there has to be chemistry. I have to convey what the mission is. I have to ensure that they are aligned with that mission, right? And at the end of the day, you need to trust they will be able to do the job, not just micromanage them, get it done. So that is very powerful stuff. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's actually another component to that. What I think people miss when we're having the culture discussion is a lot of people kind of sometimes they hire for culture, but what they don't hire for, what they miss in some cases, does that person actually love what they're actually doing? And so you can have a great person in a great culture, but if they don't like what they're doing, then you're out of sync a bit, right? And so culture, again, is a bit of a lagging indicator in some sorts, where you want to hire those people that absolutely love what they do. And I've had an interview with people who are collectors, they're collection agencies, and they hire people who actually light up when they hear the bell ring from the phone, knowing that someone's going to yell at them. But for some reason, they have a high because they're going to turn that person's life around. And when they have that kind of an attitude, that attitude is now pervasive because everybody's happy. And guess what? They're 300% more successful in collecting because they're changing lives. It's not about collecting money. It's about making it easier for other people to fulfill their obligations. And when you make that slight shift in that messaging, that's a huge way of a different way of thinking about that role, and those are the type of people you want to hire.
Amazing. Wow. Yeah, that's that's is real powerful stuff, because what happens is that you really need to be dialed in on who you're serve, like as a business, that are behind you to make and have also need to be. And if it's not, well, now not problems. Now you're spending money at employees. You're probably on bad marketing, and you really need to make sure that the message you're getting out is genuine. It's like you need that that everyone appreciates it, can understand it, right? And that's not always very easy to to push out, right? Because you really need to understand it for yourself, and you need to say it in a way that people will understand what it is you explain. So
Yeah, absolutely, and we also have to be careful that when we say it's not easy, well, actually, it is. What we say it's not easy is because sometimes we have embedded processes in place, again, it all depends upon how complex your processes are in place, how many people you have, and how nimble you are in changing. But these are behavioral changes that you can institute right away. And what happens when you institute these behavioral changes, you start to self-select those people out that aren't going to be on board, and it becomes really, really easy to figure that out. You repel those people that aren't going to come in anyways because you've changed the way that you're thinking and and you're really being trust based, and you attract those people that are going to be there. So it ends up, just a small behavioral change is an excellent filtration process to move your business forward. And sure, there's going to be some times where there's adjustment, and we're looking at lagging indicators when it comes to P&L and other types of things you want to take a look at. But the resulting, sort of, bottom feeding or kind of choppy waters is just going to really, really accelerate. And don't forget, while you're accelerating because you're doing things the right way, your competitors are decelerating because they're not doing it the right way. And so you become a champion pretty quickly. And again, 14 seconds leads to an amazing, amazing road to success very, very quickly.
very powerful stuff. Thank you so much for sharing. Can you please let everyone know how they can learn about, find out more about you, uh, find your books, and how to reach out to you directly if they'd like?
Yeah, absolutely. So they can go to sunilgodse.com, and that's everything where there's intuitive branding all there. I'm also on Intuition, on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, more so LinkedIn with the intuitive branding stuff. Facebook and Instagram are more so on the personal intuition side. Although I do have an Sunil Godse IB Instagram profile there, and so that's one specifically in intuitive branding. And so, yeah, they can reach out to me through there, send me a DM, happy to answer any questions. And if they do want to work with me one-on-one, give me a call. Let's figure it out so that I can help you crush your competition. And it's going to take 14 seconds and make you successful.
Amazing, amazing stuff. So Neil, thank you so much for joining me today. This has been a lot of fun. I love out on this stuff, and especially about just more and more powerful ways to engage your clients and to and to build a better business. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much.